Welcome back to The Echoes. I'm Jessica Smetana. He's Mike Golic Jr. Subscribe, rate, review. Follow us along. Thanks for tuning in today. We are at The Echoes ND Pod on all your social media apps. And also we're on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Mike, we want to now talk about the controversy of the century, the Notre Dame-USC series. Shouldn't be controversial at all. Should just be a thing that we do every year and we don't have to talk about it. It's just a thing we expect as college football fans. And yet here we are in the year of our Lord 2025, almost exactly 100 years to the
Yeah.
day
Wow.
of the first Notre Dame USC game, which was in 1926. So, Mike, last week, Big Ten Media Days, we get some more comments from Lincoln Riley about the state of the Notre Dame USC series. Up to this point, if you have not been following along, Notre Dame has said, Pete Bavacqua, the athletic director, has said, we want to schedule this game every year. We have no issues continuing to play USC. Marcus Freeman has said, we want to play against USC every year that college football is played, like, period, end of sentence. Meanwhile, Lincoln Riley has said, we need to make sure it works because of the new expanded playoff. He's claimed, like last week at Big Ten Media Days, that he wants to play Notre Dame, but there's also a but at the end of it every time, which is, but we want to make sure we don't make our schedule too hard so we miss the playoff. Mike, first off, what are your thoughts on the most recent batch of comments from Lincoln Riley about the USC Notre Dame series?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because the question that Lincoln was asked in the press conference didn't have anything to do with continuing the rivalry. It mentioned the timing of it. He got asked about it because there are people that had broached the subject of maybe Notre Dame plays USC at the beginning of the season in one of these kickoff classics, because with a lot of these, losing early in college football has always been really valuable. These games become more forgivable once you get to the conference slate. And it makes sense chronologically. You always want to be the best team and the best version of yourself come November. Teams improve over the course of a season. So he got asked about the timing and then launched into, because a lot of this has turned into the indictment of Lincoln Riley, the competitor, and this conversation about him not wanting to play the game. And he made the point that, like when he took the Oklahoma job, his first thought was, I get to coach in OU Texas here. He appeals to the, when I got the USC job, I was like, I get to coach in ND USC. And I've always told the story, like, that was how I felt about being a player and coming to Notre Dame. We played USC in 2012, the last game of the regular season before our national championship berth. It was a pseudo play-in game in the BCS area. If we would have lost that game, we would have not made the college football playoff to play Alabama. And I sat with my dad in the hotel the night before the game, and I said, I understand what's on the line, but I came here to beat this team. And we had basically gone back and forth between beating each other, usually on the road, in that rivalry during my college career. And so that meant a lot to me to go. And so I understood that appeal from Lincoln Riley, and just part of me almost believed him. Like, I do think he does get a lot of the slings and arrows that come with this for decisions that we know aren't made by the coaches. It's not like Lincoln gets to make the call ultimately on what happens in the series. The problem is, none of the reasons given by Lincoln Riley or the other coaches in the Big Ten, in my mind, really hold a lot of water, because Lincoln mentioned, hey, there's a lot of differences between the two schools. We're in a conference. Notre Dame's not, which has only been the case for checks notes the entirety of this rivalry, especially in modern football. Both these teams have always been competing for national championships, and now there's never been easier access to the championship event in the
Correct.
sport
Yes.
than there is right now with all of this. So this notion that you would want to remove the stakes from this rivalry, which to your point has been a Big Ten talking point, clearly handed down by Tony Petitti to everyone else, that these guys are following to the letter of the law, it's antithetical to everything that we love about the big time rivalries in college sports. And so none of that passes the smell test, which to me does make it more believable that all of these coaches are going out here and towing the company line, trying to get the version of the playoff that they all want.
Right. Well, the version of the playoff they all want is this 4-4-2-2-1 plan where the Big Ten and the SEC would get 4 automatic qualifiers, the ACC and the Big 12 would get 2, and then there'd be a G6 and then at-large teams. And Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, said that he thinks if a team has an 8-4 record, that they should be eligible for the postseason, and a team with that record in any other sport translated to a winning percentage would be in the postseason. That is just not how college football has worked for the entire history of college football. So I think trying to convince fans that that's true is going to be its own struggle. But there was also reporting in Sports Illustrated by Pat Forty, Mike, that Petitti has already made assurances to the Big Ten broadcast partners that they would eventually get this playoff format, and it would include additional play-in games, and it would be a third place and sixth place Big Ten ranked, or third place and sixth place in the Big Ten playing against each other as a play-in game to the college football playoffs. So this is
Well, yeah, because it would be what, 1 versus 2 would play for the Big Ten
right.
championship, both guaranteed a playoff spot. 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5 would then play for the other 2 playoff spots out of the conference, right?
Yes, and, like, so the which is more television inventory, just to sort of
Yes.
state the obvious. So, obviously, more money for the conferences, and they don't make $100 million per school is not enough. They need more, Mike. Which is sort of like my big beef with all of this is that, like, I don't think there's a bottom. I think it will just we'll just continue to change things because there will always be an opportunity to make more money to the point where the product ultimately may be diluted, and that's sort of like the existential fear about all of this. But just
Yeah.
in a sort of like, how does this affect Notre Dame fans now way? This season is, or I guess next 2026 is the last scheduled Notre Dame USC game in LA. And oh wait, no, it's this. Sorry,
No,
it's this
they didn't.
one.
No, USC wanted to extend
That's right.
that and give themselves the last game in the series as the home game, and Notre Dame promptly said no to that. So as it's scheduled right now,
Thank you.
this fall in South Bend is the last version of the Notre Dame-USC rivalry that's scheduled at this point. They weren't going to give up the last version of that game while USC wouldn't commit long term to
Exactly. Notre
this.
Dame wants a long-term extension, and USC is sort of saying, "Well, maybe we can play at the beginning of the season, maybe we can do this, or maybe I don't know." Like they're just trying to get what's beneficial to them out of it because playing Notre Dame is hard, and they are putting this in the context of, well, the Big 10 plays 9 conference games and the SEC and the ACC only play 8, and we think they should play 9, and until they play 9, we're not going to schedule difficult non-conference opponents. This is where Indiana plays into it because Indiana recently canceled a series with Virginia of all of all Power Four
Yeah.
teams. They don't want to play Virginia. They replaced it with Kennesaw State, Mike, which just became an FBS team like a year ago. They were, I think, statistically the worst. Maybe Kent State was worse last year, but one
Yeah.
of the worst teams last season in college football and FBS football. So I don't know. I'm not buying it because I think that first of all, the reason why people are claiming Lincoln Riley is scared is because if you win the game, it doesn't matter. If you win the game,
Right.
it boosts your strength of schedule, it boosts your criteria, and you shouldn't be afraid to lose, right? Like that is why people are saying, okay, he's just scared of losing. Notre Dame's record over the last um 12 seasons, I guess 14 seasons is or 12 seasons is 9-3 against USC. Notre Dame has really won the series and there's a number of reasons for that, right? Like Brian Kelly got the program to a place where they were winning a lot of these games. Clay Helton and all of the various USC administrative and head coaching hires got to the place where USC has been struggling over the last decade. And
Yep.
they have tried to turn it around. They hired Lincoln Riley, paid him a boatload of money, obviously hired Chad Bowden from Notre Dame to try to revamp the recruiting, especially in the California area. And they have a
Yeah.
bomb recruiting class coming in for next season.
I
So
can say it has worked so
it
far.
has worked so far. I mean, they did lose to Maryland last year. Like they did lose a number of Big Ten games last year that USC, I think, just expects to win, right? Like, sure, you can take your Penn States or whatever, like teams that made the playoff, Notre Dame, but
Sure.
they lost to Maryland in a game where they had a huge lead going into halftime. So it hasn't worked out on the field yet, but clearly they're trying to turn things around. So if you have this like amazing recruiting class coming in, you believe in Lincoln Riley, like you believe that this should be a game that you can win. And that's where the USC is scared thing is coming into play. So yes, I think he is towing the company line, trying to sell the playoff format to people and trying to, I think the Big Ten as a whole is trying to make it sound like they're the ones that have it the hardest because It's not
Yes.
fair that the SEC only plays 8 games. It's not fair that they're expected to play a 9-game conference schedule and play Notre Dame and play Texas. Ohio State's playing Texas this year in the non-con. And I just think, as a whole, it is a huge bummer that that is where the college football discourse has gotten us and the playoff discourse has gotten us. Because if you are going to expand the playoff and you do lose to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is, say, a top 25 team, um, you would kind of like logically that wouldn't be the end of the world now versus when it was a 14 playoff or even
Oh,
before the playoff where it's like, yeah, like you said, that would end your season.
it's the notion that even in the 14 playoff era, teams weren't rewarded for challenging themselves out of conference, even if that ended in a loss, is just not true. Like this picture that we've had painted by conferences trying to act like the SEC, that strength of schedule is ignored, or that the ninth conference game is this massive delta, when especially with the like massive version of both of these new conferences where the SEC and the Big Ten are so bloated with teams now, we can't act like just because a team is in the Big Ten, especially in the bottom half of these conferences, that team is markedly better than people from the Big 12 or the ACC when it comes to the bottom of the conference. So you're not going to get that this ninth game matter is the end of the world in terms of this. Does it speak to what college football has always had as a problem, which is the fact that the scheduling is uneven and hard to judge one against the other in a way that makes picking a championship field for the sport and understanding who's good year to year extremely difficult? Hell yes, there is nothing new about that. That is a college football problem as old as time. But we've got everyone doing is really doing a good job of feeding the propaganda machines to create the reality they want to make us all believe, oh yeah, the sport's gotta be this way. This is clearly the only way you're going to be able to have playoff success, where that's not true. We've seen all the time there's a ton of different ways to do this. I understand in the Big Ten, going back to when Michigan first beat Ohio State and got to the playoff, they did on the backs of one of the week conference, a week out of conference schedule. Their national championship season was more the same. It worked. And so when people see the ball go through the basket, we hear the copycat league. And I'm not saying this is all Michigan's fault or anything. I'm sure there's examples of plenty of people doing it before it, but it just seems to be where now it's being driven home that that's the only way to make it to the college football playoff version that you want. And we've seen over a decade now that that's just, I don't think, true.
Yeah, and just to sort of like reiterate, I think why a lot of USC fans and Notre Dame fans feel betrayed by this, because it's not just Notre Dame fans who are like,
No,
Lincoln Riley, you stink. Like, just play the damn game the way it's always been played. Like, no, Notre Dame materially has not changed anything. They are still independent. They still want to schedule you. The USC is the one that was like, well, we're going to join the Big Ten, and now our lives are going to get a lot harder because we have to travel across the country 6 times a year. No one made you do that, first of all. So that is the one material change of the last like 3 years, right? Like USC is in the Big Ten now for
yeah,
some odd reason because they wanted more money. But this is like, to use this specific rivalry as leverage or as like a sort of bargaining chip, I think is sort of antithetical to why we're all here. Like you said, playing when you're a player at Notre Dame and you're playing USC, like that is a game that is circled on your calendar. And a lot of the sport has revolved around like who's in the playoff, who's going to be in this playoff spot, who's going to be on that playoff spot. But part of the reason that like I fell in love with college football, and why I'm sure you did too, Mike, is because of the rivalries. It's because of the things that set college football apart from the NFL, which is, if you want football with parity, that's Sundays. Like we have that in the NFL. And like it's taken a lot of things to get that we will just never have in college football. So you could chase,
right.
these scheduling agreements as long as you want. I just don't think it's possible. There's like 134 FBS teams, but that's besides the point. Like we have a football league with parity already, and it's not college football.
And well, I mean, college football now, in a lot of ways, has more parity than it has in a while
Yes, true.
because of NIL and the portal and the way that's evened things out. And quite honestly, the retirement of Nick Saban in a way that kind of shifted the tectonic plates of the sport.
Thank God.
But like Jess, to your point, and this is, you're right, a more existential conversation, but I've always said, if you fracture enough of the base of what made college football great, which is regionality, these rivalries, long-standing ties between fan bases and the people that they either love or hate, do you risk alienating the people that have always been the core? Notre Dame USC is a really interesting through line through all of this. Like, yes, to your point, growing up and watching the Bush Push game, which famously had two teams that had national championship implications in their season that were on the line in that game, made the game feel as big as it was. Us playing Notre Dame, USC in 2012, even though they were now unranked, still had those implications. Like removing that all of a sudden removes the teeth from something that's so special. And by the way, isn't a regional rivalry like Notre Dame USC is a helmet game that excites modern television executives the way like Notre Dame and Clemson announcing their new series in a rivalry that's become more of a thing since Notre Dame's entrance into the ACC as a partial member. Notre Dame USC is the kind of helmet game that TV execs would draw up and say, well, yeah, we want to make that happen because these are big brands that draw people in. And like you said, it's got a century of experience
Yeah.
behind it. Like this is something you should all want to protect at the foundation of what still should be the thing that people making the decision acknowledge help makes this sport great.
I would even add like a more recent USC Notre Dame example of like, this is what we play the games for. 2023, Notre Dame was coming off of two like really tough losses to Ohio
Yep.
State and Louisville, and then hosted USC and Caleb Williams at home. Obviously, we all remember what happened. He threw 3 picks to Xavier Watts. I believe it was just an absolutely dominant defensive performance from Notre Dame. And that season, like no, that was huge for Notre Dame because yeah, they didn't make the playoff. They were not they didn't live up to the potential that I think a lot of us had hoped going into the season, but you beat USC. Like that's something that you remember, and like it was a sort of home atmosphere and environment that fans will just remember forever, even though they didn't
Yep.
win the national championship this year. These are like, it's sort of frustrating that a lot of the, sports has become like, let's say Notre Dame loses to Miami and Texas A&M. It's like, okay, well, they probably realistically don't have a great shot at making the 12-team playoff. Should they just not play the games then? Like, what are the things that as a fan you get excited for? It's rivalries, it's the home games, it's tailgating, it's player development, it's the band. It's like all of these things that set college football apart from professional football, like the NFL. And so, yes, like I said, using this as like a sort of bargaining chip, when this game goes back to 1926, when Newt Rockne was looking for a rival on the West Coast to play against. He was the ultimate college football salesman, and he wanted to sell Notre Dame across the country. And there was all sorts of reasons why the Western Conference, which is now the Big Ten, they didn't want Notre Dame, Catholic school. Like, we don't want to play against you. We don't want to schedule you. So Notre Dame's like, okay, we'll play USC then. And it became a rivalry that has been played 95 times, Mike. This will be the 96th meeting between the two schools. They've only paused it for COVID and World War II. So this is a
Like,
huge deal. I mean,
yeah.
people compare this to, well, Notre Dame canceled their series with Michigan
Yes.
in 2013 when they joined the ACC for the 5-game scheduling agreement. I'm sorry, it's not the same thing. Okay, it is not the same thing. Notre Dame and Michigan have a very hated rivalry that goes back to Newt Rockne and Fielding Yost in like the 1909, the first time they paused that series. But there were decades where Notre Dame and Michigan didn't play each other because Michigan didn't want to play Notre Dame and Newt Rockne and Fielding Yost hated each other. So this is not the same thing. All of those years, Notre Dame played USC. And I think Navy is the only team that Notre Dame's played more games against. They've played 2 more games against Navy than they have against USC. And
Yeah.
behind that is Purdue, Pitt, Michigan State, a number of other teams that Notre Dame doesn't schedule every single year, including Michigan. So it's not the same thing. And I don't like when people try to make that equivalence, because this is like if Michigan canceled playing Ohio State every year.
Yes.
That is the better comparison.
And I think a lot of people poke fun because Notre Dame has so many like quote unquote rivalries and trophies and all that
Yes.
stuff that like this is the one. To your point, Michigan is Notre Dame's rivalry of proximity. We I as a player hated Michigan because we were so close to them. We're right on the border in Niles, Michigan. You see fans are there all the time. It was a lot more frequent. USC was the one where it was like this begrudging respect for something and a brand that for me in the early 2000s, an era where this would have never been a conversation that was even broached, this idea that Pete Carroll's USC would not be playing someone for fear of how it might affect their playoff chances. The thing that's ticked me off most in this is I've heard people say, well, USC doesn't need this game. No one in this needs this game in terms of the bottom line of playoff access. Everyone should want this game for all the reasons that you mentioned, like images of Sam Hartman in his only year at Notre Dame in the tunnel tossing down the Trojan sign after he helps win that game, upending the Heisman trophies, Caleb Williams in the process. Like all of that stuff matters, making those little memories.
Yeah.
So I don't know where it goes from here, Jess. I hope everyone involved has enough shame to understand that this should continue and mean something to a lot of people, but we'll kind of have to wait and see on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't need a nitro cold brew every morning, Mike, but it is something that I look forward to when I wake up because I do it every day and it makes me feel good. Sometimes it might ruin my day because I'll have a caffeine crash at 10 a.m. Some days I feel amazing afterwards. I don't need it, but this is what life is for. Life is for getting absolutely jacked up on nitro and then watching college football and hating a team for no reason other than you're very familiar with them and you just want to beat them and you want to laugh at their mascot trying to use his little stabby sword in the middle of the field and it falling over. That is what it's about. That is why we play the games.
Notre Dame USC, the nitro cold brew of college football.